Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you could make it today. I'm Nikki Irish, Outreach and Education Coordinator for the DC Bar Lawyer Assistance Program. And we are happy you could make it for an honest conversation about harnessing embodied practices for the year ahead. Today's session will blend experiential practice with conversation. No prior experience necessary, just an open mind and a willingness to explore. So we're January 28th, so barely a month into the year. Many of us are already navigating a whirlwind of information and change. And so we thought embodied practices might just be what we need right now. So to start, to offer a kind of a simple bare bones definition, an embodiment practice involves using our body's sensations as a tool for greater awareness, presence, and self-regulation. While we all know lawyers tend to live in their heads, sometimes our bodies have valuable insights too. We hope the conversation today will leave you curious to explore more about how we can listen to our bodies to help our own well-being and also hopefully with being a bit more effective in high pressure environments and maintaining standards of law practice in challenging circumstances. As a quick reminder, the Lawyer Assistance Program is free, confidential, and here to support you. We offer individual counseling, referrals to amazing resources like Glenn, online support groups, and educational programming for legal organizations. Denise, our LAP Associate Director, and Senior Counselor Sharon are both here and will help moderate the chat. And as always, please use the chat box to ask questions, share insights and resources and experiences. And I'll work on paying attention to the questions and kind of slot them in where it seems most appropriate. And I'm going to let Glenn introduce themselves and then we will get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Glenn Bradley. My pronouns are they or just my name, Glenn. I'm a licensed graduate professional counselor here in DC. I work in private practice at 2 different clinics. And I'm here today to talk about mindfulness practices in a therapy setting. And I really appreciate the invitation to join, and I'm excited to get started. Maybe another thing I forgot to mention is I have been practicing mindfulness now for about 10 years. And so I brought it into a therapy practice for about the last 3 years.
Thank you. We're really pleased to have you and kind of look forward to this. I think we talked about maybe opening with a little bit of an exercise just to get us started.
Yeah, sounds great. For those of you who are in a space and willing to turn your camera on, it's great for me to get some feedback to see how people are doing the practice so I can follow along. So I'll just invite you to do that now if you want. And so this will be a deep breathing exercise, and we're going to use our hands today. So take your dominant hand, put it on your belly button, and then your non-dominant hand and put it on your chest right beneath your collarbone. And if it feels right for you, go ahead and gently close your eyes. We're going to breathe in through our nose. So in through the nose. And then when you're ready, out through the mouth. In through the nose again. And out through the mouth. And this time we're going to add in pauses between each breath. So in through the nose. And pause, gently holding the breath. And then out through the mouth. Pausing again, the end of the breath. In through the nose again. And pausing. And then out through the mouth. And pausing. And start to find your own pace, going slow. Letting your body show you when is the end of my inhale. And feel into that. Try and breathe a little bit longer into the inhale. Using each movement of the breath as a stretch. So stretching on the pause, stretching on the exhale. Stretching on the pause again. And as you lengthen each step of the breath, shift your awareness to each of your hands. Notice how one hand maybe moves more than the other. And when you're ready, start to bring your awareness to the room that you're in. You can do that by moving your hands, touching your lap, the desk or chair in front of you. Start to listen for a sound in your own environment. And then letting your eyelids, being the world's slowest curtain on a stage, just slowly open them up, bringing in a little bit of light, letting them settle at half open, and noticing any urge to just go open wide all the way real quick and holding that gently, slowly opening all the way. So I see that some of us joined and were able to have their camera on. Thank you. What was that like for some people?
Feel free to share in the chat. I'm happy to read it, or you can unmute and share. Ah, it's the first time all day where I was not tense.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Jessica.
I really appreciate just like taking the moment and being like, okay, before we dive in, right, I can kind of expand a little bit and didn't
Yeah,
feel a little as tight. I kind of expanded.
I think
Easier to do this in a group.
yeah,
sometimes it's hard to almost remember when you're going to breathe next when you're getting in the groove of it. It's almost like in a meditation where when you start to drift and you kind of want to bring yourself back, um it's not always easy staying in that groove of the breathing, the pausing, the exhaling when other things are tugging at your mind, and coming back is not the easiest.
yeah. Our
Thank you.
breath is a window into how we're doing with our stress, what we're carrying, what emotions are there, what we're maybe avoiding. And what I found in my work with myself and then with clients that I work with is that sometimes in that pause, there's a whole wealth of information. And they're like, okay, well, I really want to go to the next part. I really want to go to the inhale. I really want to go to the exhale. And when I do this more for like 10 minutes with the client, I'll actually ask them to lengthen the pause until it's uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And keep adding a little bit longer, and then noticing what's uncomfortable. And we talk it through. And we then explore, what are the themes that are coming up in the discomfort? What does it remind them of? And so even something just simple as learning how to breathe slowly and fully. Day to day when we're breathing, it's kind of a in and out, in and out. We forget to pause. It's uncomfortable.
As somebody noticed, right, mentioned it felt nice to move at a calmer pace.
Yeah.
Which is not something we also often, at
Mm.
least some of us, make time to do. And kind of something Stephanie mentioned, right? It reminded her kind of some different mindfulness or awareness practices. And I guess I'm gonna use that to jump into maybe one of the first questions is just like, this is one approach or exercise. Kind of what are the different styles of mindfulness or awareness practices that kind of exist in this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So mindfulness and awareness is a really broad umbrella. It's anything that brings us back to our body. Because when we come back to our body, that's a window back into this moment of time, just right now. So that can look like what we just did, coming back to the breath. It can look like yoga, a class, a structured thing of some sort. It could even be like Zumba or Pilates. For some people, it's listening to music that helps them slow down. Other things can be a immersive experience, like going out in nature, going for a hike, but doing it slowly, not doing a hike to, get a certain number of miles in a certain amount of time, but slowing down, noticing not just the flowers, but the rocks, the moss. What does this tree feel like? What does this other tree and the bark feel like? Really getting tactile. So it could also be cooking, but cooking in a way that's slow, like what we did with the breath, not cooking to just get a meal done or popping something in the oven and getting it done. But for example, I made a salad last night, and to do it in a mindful way, I tasted I had like a broccoli raw thing. I tasted it before I seared it a little bit. It's like a seared salad. I tasted it before, tasted it with the dressing, tasted it once it was cooked, noticing the transformation, noticing the different texture, how it changed. So really bringing us back into this moment. It can also look like, for some people, using like a recording, a guided meditation. For others, there's maybe a spiritual practice that gets added to it, either individually or in community. Um, it can also look like doing art in a creative way or in an art therapy setting. Um, there's also different types of like sleep meditation that are generally guided until someone learns the pace of it for themselves. But anything that helps you slow down and fill your awareness with what's here compared to what we imagine, which is not what's here.
There's so many different ways to do mindfulness, right? And I think I would guess many people have maybe even unintentionally almost done some of it sometimes somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But I guess thinking about the intentionality of it with so many different ways to do it, do they do different things? Like, are there different goals with these different types of practice?
Yeah. There are definitely different goals. So, for example, with apps, there's a lot of apps coming out now selling mindfulness, and they're helpful. They're an okay place to start. But I really would encourage people to focus on, okay, what's my goal of using this resource or a certain space or class or whatever it may be. So for things like an app or a short video, the goal is often, even if it's an unspoken goal, the goal can be, how can I get a break from something? How can I focus on just this moment and get a break? I don't actually want to really investigate what's there. I just need to come back to my breathing. Whatever it is that has me stressed out, I need a break from that. And that's a great goal, particularly in the short term. But it's all I can really manage in the short term. And so other practices are what I call looking deeply. And looking deeply would be more of what I alluded to with, okay, so we did the deep breathing, but then getting curious, slowing down that pause. Where does the pause get a bit uncomfortable? And where is that in the body? For some people, it'll be in the gut, in the chest, in the throat, shoulders. Um, and then honing a gentle curiosity with that looking deeply. So that type of looking deeply, it looks more like a dialogue with our body. That takes a lot of training and practice that, at least now, I haven't quite seen an app do yet, or a YouTube video. It's more supportive to do it in a relationship with someone. It could be an individual setting or a group setting. But one of the things that I often find from clients when they come to me is they'll mismatch a goal and a modality. And so maybe they're using something that kind of approximates looking deeply, but it leads them to just follow the thought train and the anxiety spiral, and they're not getting the break that they want. And so helping them match and identify, okay, what is this moment? If this is a moment right before something stressful or right after something stressful, if you don't have time to look deeply, if you don't have half an hour, whatever it is, then this is let's get a break. Um, and helping to train ourselves to identify those different times, those different goals, even when maybe a part of us really wants to look deeply, but giving that part of space to show up outside of the immediate short-term goals.
Do you think those mismatches sometimes just come from misconceptions about what the practices are?
Yeah, definitely. Um, One of the most common misconceptions is, well, Glenn, I've tried meditation before. Maybe I've joined a spiritual or religious practice, or I've tried an app, or I've done a video, or I watched this movie or whatnot. I just wasn't able to clear my mind. And the mischievous part of me likes to laugh. Um, in part because we have no way of clearing our mind. Some people think that maybe our mind will be cleared like once our life has ended and we've passed on, and even then we don't know. Our mind might be full in the hereafter. And so lovingly, I like to look at just that phrase, mindfulness, or that word, and flip it.
Mm,
Mindfulness isn't emptying the mind, it's how we fill the mind. So it's how we fill our awareness. And that simple switch is often enough to help someone see, oh wait, I'm not doing it wrong.
mhm,
Of course I'd have a distraction. There are no distractions. It's just, this is what I'm aware of. This is what
mhm,
is coming in. This is what I'm bringing in. Or this is what something outside of me is influencing my awareness. And that again points to a different goal. And so when there's something that someone sees as a distraction, or it's, I just, there's too much of this right now. Okay, well, let's focus on the calming, the grounding. But that calming and grounding isn't all of mindfulness.
mhm,
So sometimes the misconception is mindfulness is just grounding. But then people start to learn or think that grounding is erasing what they don't want.
mhm,
We can't do that. We can get a break, we can give it a container,
mhm.
but it's still going to be there. It still needs to be tended to.
And the kind of looking deeply practice is kind of the attending to?
Yeah. Looking deeply is that dialogue. So, an example of looking deeply, and I'll do a short version of it. So, with the breath, I have my dominant hand on my belly, non dominant underneath my collarbone on my chest. And for me right now, I notice that my belly is moving more than my chest. And so that's belly breathing. Generally speaking, belly breathing is when our nervous system is a bit more relaxed. Chest breathing, like it's shallower, it's quicker. If you've ever been to a doctor with a stethoscope and they say, take a deep breath, and they go, it's funny because it's not really a deep breath, it's a shallow breath. Our lungs are an accordion that go up and down more so. So deep breathing is belly breathing, when the lungs push down and push the abdomen out. So what I notice when I look more deeply at the breathing with my abdomen is a sense of groundedness, presence. And then my awareness is kind of like I'm drawn to my heartbeat. I feel it a bit in my ears, which is weird, but it's like I feel my eardrums a little bit beating with my heartbeat. And I just noticed that I've got a lot of people's attention. But notice how when I come back to my body, there's this groundedness in my core and this alertness in my ears. And so looking deeply is training ourselves to do that type of dialogue rather than, well, I feel my heartbeat and that means I must be nervous and that means that I must be doing something wrong and that means this and this and this. It's not interpreting, it's just staying with and observing and learning how to let that be enough. And then start to ask questions.
So I don't have to stop at let that be enough, because I like noticed an instinctual resistance to that when you said just like let that be enough.
Yeah, so then that's where there'd be more looking deeply. And so if this was therapy together, which
Right.
it's not, but if it
Sure.
was, I might ask, like, where is that in your body? Where is that? I kind of saw it as a shrug or a movement of some sort. So I'd ask you to exaggerate it, to act it out, to show it to me, to deepen it. which again is difficult to do on our own, because then it's like, well, I'm acting out this thing for who?
Mhm.
And who is seeing it? Who's giving me feedback?
Yeah.
Majority of our communication socially is not verbal. It's in posture. It's in whatever this is. It's in our micro expressions. And so until we have like a mirror that can talk back at us and say, hey, I saw this from you, we need someone else for that.
And I would imagine or maybe it's just something that, like, at least in talk therapy, right? Like, not everything we think is the same version of an experience somebody else might be witnessing
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or see. But so I'm curious if, like, looking deeply is it's more, right? Essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a lot of the talk about kind of the mindfulness and the grounding space. The short term, right? Like creating a little bit of breathing room. The looking deeply sounds a bit different, and maybe I don't see as much of that out there. Um, is that something you can talk to, or why that is, or?
Yeah. So looking deeply takes time and effort and practice and skills. Um, in different traditions, they'll call it like right mindfulness or correct mindfulness, or maybe a different interpretation is having like a core value or ethos of some sort to guide. Um, with the quicker stuff, there's just a cultural fixation on quick fixes. It sells subscriptions, it sells trials. Um, and it's something, it's nice for what it is, but it doesn't lead us to turn toward. So the deep looking is turning toward, being with, attending to, seeing, okay, well, why is there this sinking sensation in my sternum? What is that trying to tell me?
Mhm.
Instead of this sensation is wrong and it's like inappropriate and I shouldn't have it. So I'm just gonna, it's not working. What am I doing wrong? Well, you're not doing anything wrong. uh, and so that's where having someone who can help guide you with balancing the smoothing over, the giving boundaries, the containing, the initial calming, with then having a trusted space of, okay, let's look deeply together. Um, and in essence, that takes, at least in our culture and society, that looks like a certain style of therapy. It can be found a little bit in some different spiritual meditation practices, um, but in a sort of recurring setting, that's what like somatic therapy would look like, or Gestalt, some types of mindfulness space, but it's not as popular because it doesn't really fit neatly into like, here's a quick fix, and it also doesn't always fit neatly into like, here's a medical diagnosis or here's a medical approach to mental health. So there's a big cultural difference between mental health spaces on the East Coast, DC, Mid-Atlantic, and then West Coast, Cali, Seattle, Portland. Even just how
What
therapists dress looks different.
different cultural ways of being, I think.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Why would somebody, like, why would I choose to go to therapy for, like, somatic therapy?
Yeah. Um, a lot of people choose that out of coming to realize these things for themselves, that the app wasn't enough or the video wasn't enough, or they tried it and they felt like it didn't work for them. Um, other people will choose this style from wanting a space where they can lean into the less cognitive. And so our cognitive parts are really important. They're really helpful. They are what allow us to meet online on Zoom. Without cognitive parts, we wouldn't have this technology. Without cognitive parts, we wouldn't have attorneys. So they're very needed, very crucial. But we have a much wider breadth of existing and encountering ourselves, encountering life. And so somatic, gestalt, mindfulness based, um, there's other niche ones like Hakomi method and other styles, but they help people lean into what feels vague and ephemeral when what they want is concrete and certain. And so another misconception sometimes is that people need to like the vague and ephemeral to do a style of therapy that looks there. And I would actually argue that the most helpful is for people who don't like that, who avoid it, who don't know what to do with it.
Because what is the benefit of facing it versus avoiding it?
Yeah. The benefit is then that by facing it, we're allowed to adjust to it. So whatever's here in the body, it's asking us to adjust in some way, to make some decision, but not a quick decision, to maybe work through something that keeps playing out. So there may be developmental themes where something from earlier in life, childhood, teenage, early adulthood, whatever, presents in the body as a reminder to something. So maybe a trauma history or something else that's there that's looking for a space to where the energy, the presence can be completed. And so for some people, what they experience in their body might be a sense of, well, I can't go to my gut. It reminds me of this time. My gut is bad when I go
It
there.
doesn't feel safe.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of the work is on helping someone feel safe in that space, feel much more connected.
Before I'm pausing because I had two people kind of asked you to repeat the kind of method that you had mentioned.
Oh, yeah. So there's Hakomi therapy, Hakomi. To my knowledge, there's not a lot of people on the East Coast doing it. Um, I specialize in what's called Gestalt therapy, which Hakomi is very similar to, and actually the person who developed it studied Gestalt. And then, or was studied or was in contact with people who studied, had a lot of colleagues there. There's also somatic experiencing, that'll be called SE, or sensory motor psychotherapy. Um, and all of those take in traditions of slowing down, being with, tending to. Um, there's a style called mindfulness based stress reduction.
Mhm.
And my exposure to that points more toward the building a container for something, but that the deep looking, at least in the trainings that I've taken,
Yeah.
isn't as integrated or as focused with that. There's nothing wrong with it, but just again, knowing what are the goals, what do I want from this?
I'm 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 reminding everyone this is open to questions. So please feel free to share them. What I'm hypothesizing some people might have the question is essentially like, I don't feel like I have the time to look deeply, right? Like maybe my goal right now is just like the short term get through because how do I find this time? I can barely find the time to ground, let alone look deeply.
Yeah.
Um,
So what I'd say to that is that level of awareness is already starting to look deeply. It's already recognizing there's something here, there's a suffering here, and it's hard to adjust to, it's hard to shift. I'm feeling really rigid.
mhm,
It feels too big to go slow.
mhm,
And so what I'd encourage someone with that is, with that experience, is to lean into it, to be forward, honest about it, reach out to someone who uses one of these approaches. If you find someone in the area, say, hey, this is where I'm at.
mhm,
I feel like I can't quite look at the problem just yet. And even I shirk at the word problem, but it's a quicker way of describing it. So I can't even really think about what's the problem here, or what's going on. I
mhm.
need someone to just start with me with the grounding, with the building a container for my stress. And then by learning that with someone, it can help strengthen a relationship so that this person might be more willing to take that risk about slowing down. Also, therapy doesn't need to start as an hour once a week. It can be less than that. It can be a
Mhm.
different setting. There's also different types of group settings that might be more appealing or easier to join.
So you're saying if I reached out, I don't have to be ready to kind of jump into the deep end.
No. Yeah, and actually, that's not where I start with people.
Yeah.
We do at least a few weeks, and it depends on what they've done before and then what they're bringing in. Um, but we never look deeply in session one. There's a lot of building safety,
Mhm.
a lot of learning about the breath, staying with it, practicing it.
If I wanted to if I knew at some point, like maybe, that point about I've acknowledged that I don't have a lot of time to look deeply, but like there is probably something there to look deeply at. And I haven't hit the point of acceptance where I'm ready to reach out for that yet.
Mhm.
But maybe I do want to start doing something to start to build that container almost, maybe you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on like something I could do to do that?
Hmm. So, the breathing part that we started with, using your body as feedback. So,
Mhm.
again, dominant hand on the belly, non dominant hand on the chest, and just closing your eyes and measuring and noticing, okay, which hand is moving more.
Mhm.
And the more we pay attention to both hands,
Mhm.
there comes a point with practicing where it's not like I can say, okay, I'm flexing my diaphragm up and down, and now I'm doing belly breathing. But it happens in a sort of ephemeral, vague sort of sense of like, oh, I've shifted now.
Mhm.
The hand on my stomach is moving more. And so doing that slowly. Or if someone has a pet,
Mhm.
schedule in time just to cuddle with the pet.
Mhm.
Turn the phone off, not just silent mode, but turn it off. Don't let yourself get any sort of pings or distractions. Um, find moments throughout the day. Oh, nice. I see someone has a dog. But find moments throughout the day to get tactile with your senses
Mhm.
and to fully do that one thing. So if it's having a glass of water, fully have that glass of water. No TV, no walk,
Mhm.
no feeding the dogs, no
Mhm.
doing anything else. Um, and when there's that rush to fill the time to multitask,
Mhm.
exhale it as a heavy sigh
Mhm.
and just start there.
I have a question about these containers.
Yeah.
What's the durability of these containers? So
Mm.
are they cardboard boxes? Are they steel shipping containers? Because I'm thinking like, are these things that are being put away and like shipped off to who knows where? Are these things that are going to break open at the bottom at the like least opportune moment?
Hmm.
Um, when is everything going to leak out?
Yeah. So the metaphor I use is it's a bottle. And if we put a lot into the bottle and carbonate it and screw on the lid really tight and then shake it and then throw it over a fire, it's gonna explode. And so it's giving whatever's there a place to be. But the more that there's pressure on any of the skills, any of the practice, mm, the more urgency that we build with it, the less effective it is. We're going to overstretch that muscle, that inner muscle, the emotional muscle. And so the durability is really determined by our relationship with what we're doing. If it's this will save my insert whatever, well, it's not. It'll give us a break, but breathing deeply, it can only do what we give it, and we can only give it so much. And so that's where having um, some sort of space to get feedback on like, okay, this is how I'm using it, but what am I doing with it? Or I feel like I need more, there's an urgency here. Okay, well, that's where deep looking is eventually needed. What's the urgency trying to tell you? Where is it coming from? What is it asking for?
The imagery of that was helpful. And Stephanie, thank you for the question. That was right. I would imagine it also kind of varies, right, based on each of our own, what we're each bringing to it.
Yeah.
Um, are there any, somebody had asked if you have any suggestions around compulsive eating, or maybe any compulsive behaviors, but compulsive eating?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing that I have to pull out of my pocket and just start with is try and find someone who has that specialty. Um, I can't offer much of what's helpful in this type of setting. I need to know more, and it's limited. But finding someone who can be a resource, ideally a professional, who can help you slow down whatever it is that's going on there. But that's where we need someone else to help, because it's okay, what's going on when I slow down? Okay, well, here's a way of tending to that. Step one would be gentle. And so within a sense of like, what is the ethos of mindfulness? That's the thing that often gets left out of apps, or something quick. If we use a skill to be harsh on ourselves, we're not using the skill. We're being harsh on ourselves. And so that could look like, well, I'm going to use this so I stop doing this thing right away. It has a limit to it. But if we can use the skills to be more compassionate with, I'm feeling really driven to do this thing that like the me in a few minutes maybe doesn't really want to do, or even the me right now doesn't want to do. How can I bring in more compassion? How can I slow down what I'm doing? It might not interrupt it fully, but finding ways of slowing down, shortening, and taking it slow. The more we try and have an energy of harshness or rigidness or let's get it done right away, it's no longer mindfulness. It's no longer embodied practice.
Thank you. And if in that space, like finding that resource, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to reach out to me or to the resources shared there. I don't have a specialty in compulsive eating, but I could reach out to someone who does and facilitate connections. The other part there is look for signs of joy and excitement. And so when we're doing something compulsive, it's often not because it's joyous. It may feel exciting, but in an enticing way. And what's often beneath that, found through looking deeply, is, oh, this is helping me avoid this thing. I'm doom scrolling because now I'm not thinking about this. Or I filled up my shopping cart on my app or on my phone because then I'm not thinking about this. Whatever it is, whatever the enticing thing is ephemeral. It's not going to like actually do it for us. And so that's what leads to the behavior getting cemented. There's a sort of a fallacy in our mind of like, oh, well, it helped me avoid the thing, so it's fixing the thing. Avoiding doesn't fix. Avoiding doesn't change.
Just for that moment, though.
Yeah, it's very sweet in that moment. It's very enticing. It's very powerful. And so that's where interrupting whatever the doom scrolling, as an example, was coming back to the breath. The short science spiel here of deep breathing. So there's a nerve pathway called the vagus nerve. It branches and goes around the head, and that communicates micro expressions with emotions. It's probably times when people who litigate and you're saying, okay, in the courtroom, I got a sense that this person isn't saying the full thing or the exact truth. It's going to be in their micro expressions. It's the part of you that's sensing, and you might not have it tuned to like, oh, okay, their eyes in the corner are a little different, or there's a rigidness in their brow, or their eyebrows are kind of moving, whatever the tell is. It may not be something you can hone in on. For some of you, it might be. But whatever sort of extra sense that you have towards lying or whatever it is, or withholding, that's in the vagus nerve that goes around the head. Then the vagus nerve, so it branches around the head and controls that. It's also our social connection. So when we get a real sense of, yeah, this person is listening to me, this person is connecting to me. So that is the engagement part. When it branches down into the body, it touches the heart, the lungs, the diaphragm, both valves of the stomach, our intestines, our ab muscles, our pelvic floor, and it regulates stress throughout here. And I realize I'm a bit on my soapbox of this, so I'll shorten it. But the vagus nerve system throughout the body downward, when we breathe deeply, that's the one part that we can consciously interrupt. So I can't say, okay, my abs are a little tense. We can kind of relax them a bit, but it's not like we can fully relax the tension. We can't do that with our pelvic floor. We can't do it with our intestines. We can't do it with our heartbeat. We can't do it with the stomach valves, but we can do it with the breathing. and just training to learn how to move the diaphragm. And it's a vague, ephemeral training because we can't say, okay, I'm moving my diaphragm now. But to get to the belly breathing sends a signal along this pathway that can interrupt the stress signals and give the brain more of a sense of, okay, I'm regulating, I'm able to meet this moment, compared to I'm spiraling, I'm cycling, I'm moving into activation, moving into anxiety.
Thinking about, we're doing this at the beginning. Still, please, if you have questions, throw them in. I'm thinking, right, we're doing this at the beginning of the year when a lot of people have the goals for the year, resolutions, kind of practice it, like however we're defining them right now, of wanting to do something different, right? That maybe this is something I want to kind of incorporate or access as part of my resolutions for this year. And as we know, resolutions kind of have a tendency to fade probably by now almost.
Yeah.
But you use this kind of year round, right, with your clients.
Mhm.
Like how do they sustain that? How do you sustain that? How is it sustained?
Yeah, it's not linear.
Yeah.
There's often like an energy and a push and an urgency at the start to build a practice that looks a certain way each week, each day. And I like to foster both sides of that energy, the excitement, the commitment, the zest, the longing, while also encouraging gentleness. Because maybe the dog gets sick. Maybe there's a signing that doesn't go as planned. Maybe there's, something that changes. Maybe whatever it is that interrupts it. We don't need more reasons to be disappointed in ourselves. That's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is really fully embodied living with gentleness and curiosity. And anytime we try and have something linear and there's a harshness to it, an expectation, we're out of it. We're not in it. We might be breathing deeply, but we're not supporting ourselves. And so the sustaining comes from that gentleness and being flexible, being adaptive, and having conversations like, yeah, Glenn, I didn't actually use the deep breathing at all this last 2 weeks. And I didn't want to tell you that last week. So I kind of fibbed a little, but like I had to tell you. And that's where we get curious, like, okay, well, what did you do differently? What else did you do to support yourself? Oh, I was with friends more. Great. What were you doing with friends? Well, I can kind of get out of my head. I was doing this sip and paint of some sort. That sounds fun. And now that you say it, I kind of like did some playful finger painting at the sip and paint, and I like felt the texture of the paint. It got a little bit messy, and it was kind of silly, but I was fully in the painting. Well, that was your mindfulness. Maybe it wasn't breathing. Or there might be stories of, well, I didn't use the skills. And I'm not finding an example like that. Okay, what was really hard? What kept you from turning to that? What were you trying to avoid? And for some people, it's, I felt like I didn't have the strength to do it. And then part of the work is looking at, well, why do you think you need to be strong to use this? What happens when we use it when we're feeling weak?
Two biggest parts that just stood out to me as you were talking, as I'm picturing the clients I've had over the past almost 15 years, is just this two ideas of being soft and gentle with ourselves, which I have not found, at least that comes easiest to the attorneys I have dealt with. And the other, that it's not linear. Like the amount of this lawyer brain, I'm just generalizing, I'm fully realizing I'm just generalizing. But like I would like A plus B to equal C, and that is what I would like to like. That is how I want to do it. Then I will solve the problem. I feel like I often have lots of those conversations. So I guess is some of the work you end up seeing is like just being aware of the resistance in those spaces and like how to, I don't know. It's just kind of what I was thinking about with my clients. Just curious.
Yeah. And even seeing that resistance as information, I felt like I didn't have time. Ooh, nice. Let's dig into that.
Mhm.
So one of the things that some people find surprising is they'll hear that from me within the first 2 sentences of a
Mhm.
session. Like, oh, but I came here to talk about, okay, we can shift to that, but you already just said enough. And really helping people connect with embodying a practice rather than saying, well, I do this when I wake up and I do this when I go to bed, and that's enough.
Mhm.
Maybe that's a way to start,
Mhm.
but that with practice, with sustained effort, that's not linear, that's
Mhm.
adaptive, that's adjusting. Eventually, what this looks like is being able to maybe just put a hand on someone's belly button walking into the courtroom, and that's enough.
Mhm.
Not super awkward. It's not both hands. It's not people like, what are you doing?
Mhm.
Not needing to close your eyes, but it's just a small reminder.
Yeah.
And that takes time. For some people, it's months, for others, longer. But that the more we bring this, the attitude that we tap into throughout all the aspects of our life, that's where we'll find more of the change that we're looking for.
Two questions from I'm going to throw from the crowd.
Yeah.
One is a little later, and then two is a little over. So one is just you had talked kind of about the idea, right? Of we don't turn off our mind, right? That's not like we're not
Mm.
aiming to clear it. Sometimes we're changing our awareness, but we're not clearing our mind. The question is there such thing as kind of transcendence?
Mm. Well, that gets like philosophical, religious, and spiritual, and I would love to have that conversation.
But we
Uh,
have 9 minutes.
yeah. So the short answer there, it's not an answer, it's follow-up questions. Um, where does the idea of transcendence come from?
Mm,
I can speak a little bit to Buddhism as a philosophy, but there's different branches of Buddhism as a philosophy. There's one branch that focuses more on like personal transcendence. It's where we hear the word nirvana more.
mhm,
And then there's other branches of Buddhism that focus a bit differently on like a service to others, that this is a relational thing that doesn't happen just for one person. And I'm not saying one of them is better than the other, but that there's different ideas and concepts culturally and spiritually in those two settings that get really mixed up and messy in Western culture, particularly when it's sold to us. Um, and so transcendence then is, what is transcendence? What does it mean to you? And so I don't have
yeah.
is
So
there
what does it mean to you? I mean that, right? Like that is
yeah.
kind
It's a very therapist way of answering.
of
Um, but for some people, there's the I'm most familiar with Zen, so I practice Zen Buddhism. And samadhi is a word from that, where it's not a nirvana of what most of us would think of just from pop
Mhm,
culture, Western culture, of like blissed out and no longer suffering, but it's fully encountering life
mhm,
without a filter. It's being fully authentic,
mhm,
fully present, and feeling the power in that while still being compassionate and relational.
mhm.
And so that's not,
Yeah.
bliss, but
No.
it's living without these constraints that we add on to ourselves
Mhm.
as armor throughout adulthood.
The weight is different.
Yeah.
That kind of ties into the next kind of observation or comment, right? Of like right now, people may find it particularly hard to want to sit still when the world feels a bit on fire. Um, like what is the or for your clients, let's say, like where is the value for them in
Yeah.
living without all of that armor?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I can
when it
speak.
could be, yeah,
Yeah, I can speak to both that, and then I'm gonna hijack the question.
yeah, go for it.
What's the value for me? Why do I still do it?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm forgetting who I'm paraphrasing a quote from, but it's so that I don't lose myself.
Mm,
There's some quote from an activist who I'm forgetting the full context, but someone that asked this person, why do you show up? Why are you, protest, whatever it was. And this person said, well, it's so I don't lose myself. I don't think I'm going to change what this thing is, but that
Mhm.
by slowing down, we're more fully alive. Full aliveness doesn't come from chasing the adrenaline chain of now, next, next. And that slowing down is how we find the nuance.
Mhm.
And there can be suffering and pain in that and discomfort, but there's also acceptance, shifting, adjusting, and fully encountering what's there rather than living in a land of shoulds or longing or grasping. And so, particularly in this type of time, it is hard to slow down. And I would not advise looking deeply on one's own. But finding different sources of support, particularly in relationships.
Mhm.
Someone who can help you be with yourself, be with them, who, well, tangentially, it speaks to our relationship as time. And so with clients, I talk about time as an entity.
Mhm.
How are we harsh on time? How are we gentle on time? And that slowing down is a way of being gentle on time. And then time can be gentle on us.
In the recognition of time, um, I want to create space if there was any kind of practice to end. But one moment before that's just like, maybe is there like one thing you would want whoever's in attendance to like take away or think about, and then we can kind of exit out with a practice.
Yeah. You're not alone in this. These are hard times. And the part of us that wants to escape the hardness and the timeness of the hard times, it's adaptive, it's supportive, it's protective. And when we layer on so much armor, how the hell are we going to walk?
Mm.
And so we need spaces to take off the armor, to take off the weight, spaces to just be rather than do. And the energies and messages that are having us think that what we can be is limited, it's about doing, not being. We're seeing people trying to limit what we can do, but they cannot limit what we can be.
Mm.
And that's also part of embodiment practice, the difference between being and doing. So our closing practice, if it's ideal if you're sitting down. So if anyone's lying down, if you could sit up if you're able. But what we're going to do is start off with a stretch. So hands up, stretch your head up, bring your hands down to your side, and try and have your eyes sort of level. If it feels right, keep your eyes closed. And we're going to lean as far as we can to the right without falling over. And let your body remember how far that is. And we'll lean as far as we can to the left without falling over, remembering how far that is. And now we're going to speed it up a bit, going from right to left, like a pendulum that's slowing down. So each time we lean in one direction, just go a fraction less far. Keeping your spine aligned. You need to adjust your hips or your shoulders, do that. And then notice your gut, notice your abdomen. Bring in some relaxation. Allow yourself to breathe deeply. We're slowly leaning until that point where it's kind of hard to tell if we're leaning back and forth anymore. And so that point where we kind of just have to let go of the intentional leaning and trust, that's our center. Our center isn't rigid, it's not still. There's still a vibration and aliveness, a subtle movement. So this is another thing you can practice. And to come back, gently move your hands on your lap. Feel your chair, the space around you. Open your eyes slowly. Offer yourself a stretch. And a sigh. Thank you everyone for joining us today and for inviting me. Oh, Nikki, you're muted.
Thank you for being here. And I'll send out follow-up information on Glenn's contact information and some resources as well. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. And then if you want to reach me, my website is www.somaticglenn.com. And that's Glenn with just one N. My joke is one is enough. Gets the job done.
Nice. All right, thank you. I'm gonna